Most historians treat Fichte as a mere bridge between Kant and Hegel, someone who took subjective idealism to an extreme and slightly unhinged place. Zizek strongly disagrees with this dismissive view. Fichte offers profound and practical insights into how human beings experience freedom, limitation, and reality. Far from being a footnote to Hegel, Fichte provides a vital framework for understanding that our sense of the world is not passive observation but active struggle. Zizek begins by explaining what he calls the Fichtean wager. Fichte's philosophy is not about choosing between idealism and realism as academic theories. If you examine both as pure science, they both end in nonsense. Realism turns us into passive machines controlled by nature, while idealism turns us into passive dreamers watching our own thoughts. Neither option allows for real human action. For Fichte, the choice is not intellectual but practical and ethical. It is an act of faith. To act as free moral agents in the real world, we must choose to believe that we are free. Our understanding of the world does not come from passively observing it, it comes from our active, practical will engaging with it. This is not a logical proof but a decision we make by living. Fichte's famous idea is the tat handlung, which means deed activity. The human self or ich is not a solid static thing, it is pure process. The self creates itself by acting. But there is a paradox. The subject only becomes a subject by failing to fully realize itself. This failure is not a mistake, it is what the subject actually is. To feel its own existence, the self must hit a wall. Fichte calls this impact the anstos or shock. The anstos is a sudden encounter with an external obstacle that resists our will. This shock cannot be explained or predicted by logic. It comes out of nowhere because human beings are radically limited. But this very limitation is what makes us free. Without an obstacle to fight against, the self would have no reality. Zizek links Fichte's antos to Lacan's object petita. Both represent a strange nothingness that still acts as a physical cause for our desires. Fichte then sets up a system of mutual limitation between the self and the non-self. The non-self is everything that stands against us, nature, our own heavy bodies, social rules, and other people. But here is a crucial point. Every external limit we experience is actually the result of our own internal self-limitation. We create the wall we can experience, the tension of overcoming it. Zizek connects this to biology. A living cell only exists when it creates its own boundary membrane. By limiting itself and dividing inside from outside, the cell gains independent life. The human self does something similar. It sets up the non-self as a wall so it can struggle against it. Our projects define what we see as obstacles. For instance, a doctor sees high blood pressure as a problem only because their goal is to save lives. Without the goal, there is no obstacle. In his later work, Fichte grappled with the ultimate ground of the self. If the self exists only for the self, what created it? Fichte wanted to answer this without turning God into an old-fashioned cosmic tyrant who destroys human freedom. He argued that God is absolute manifestation and light. God enters a loop of self-reference through human minds. Human self-consciousness is literally the way the divine ground becomes aware of itself. God is not a separate thing out there. God exists only through this self-manifestation. Therefore, religion and human freedom do not fight each other. They are the same process. However, Fichte's philosophy eventually hit a major wall. If every self is a closed system, how can many different selves exist together in the same world? To solve this, Fichte had to assume an anonymous pre-subjective field of knowledge that exists before individual minds. This is where Hegel and Lacan take over. Lacan solves the problem with the big other, the shared social and symbolic network that connects human beings. Hegel solves it by moving from Fichte's subjective self to the concept of absolute spirit. Spirit is not a magical entity hiding behind nature. It is simply the historical process of humanity freeing itself from natural necessity. Fichte's great choice leaves us at this doorway, showing that absolute freedom requires us to constantly fight against our own limitations. Zizek concludes that Fichte is not a wild idealist to be dismissed. He is the philosopher who best shows that reality is not given to us, it is something we must actively construct through struggle.